What are you selling? This is the question that you need to ask yourself. Now, I said I do my music mostly for my own gratification. What am I selling with my music? I'm just trying to sell some enjoyable mood music, right? I just want people to have something that makes them feel calm and good for most of my music. So that's something that is a point that a lot of people miss when they are writing a book, or they're putting out music, or they're making a product, is what are you selling? Because it's easy to say, well, what are you selling? Well, I'm selling a book. Okay, great. Here's a book. What do you do with it? Well, you read it. Well, okay. I could also like put it on papers. I could throw it across the room. I could burn it for fuel. So I'm supposed to read the book. Why am I supposed to read this book? Oh, this book is got a story in it, right? So what are you selling? Oh, you're not really selling the book. You're selling the story that's in the book. So what kind of story is it that I want to read? Oh, well, it's a story about, this is a story about Prince Michael, like a knight in shining armor kind of guy, and all of the trials and tribulations he goes through with political machinations in his kingdom, basically causing him to go into exile, upending his life, and him having to go and travel through fantastical realms in order to achieve the power necessary to reclaim his place at the top of society. Right? That's that's a description. I'm telling you what's in the story. So someone's like, okay, what are you selling? I'm selling you a fantastical journey through different realms in a make-believe militaristic world that will interest you and excite you, and will make you think of battles in the real world, right? You start selling what the person feels, what the person's going to experience with your book. That's what you're actually selling. So a lot of times when people are trying to market a book, they have like, how do I market a book? Well, you sell the experience of what's in the book. You sell, and that's going to guide how you write your blurb and how you construct ads if you're going to run ads. You're selling not a book, because a book is just an object. You're selling an experience to someone, and a specific experience that they will hopefully want to have, which they're seeking out, which maybe they don't even know they want it yet, but it excites them when you tell them about it. Now, this applies to many different products besides just books that a lot of people don't really think that much about. So a great example is actually the VCR versus the Betamax videotape war of the formats from the 80s. There's been these various format wars over the years for various things, audio formats, video formats especially, because there's been so many different video formats. There was Laserdisc. There was even like a vinyl video disc thing that was really weird but exists. There was reel-to-reel tapes, various kinds of videotapes. So the big one in the 80s was between VHS and Beta. And most people tell you Beta was better. And if you were to plug in a Beta and a VHS now, you probably wouldn't see that much of a difference. But in the early 80s, there was definitely a stronger difference. Beta had better image quality. It had much better audio. But it had a couple of things going for it that were not so good. One was it had a limit on the tape length. So, made it inconvenient to have movies that were above a certain length. But really what it came down to was why did VHS win if it wasn't as good a quality as the Betamax? And the reason was it was better quality of a different kind, because you have to think about what you're selling to a consumer when you're selling them a VHS player, VCR player. You're selling them access to movies. You're selling them something that they want, an experience, watching a movie at home. That's what you're selling them when you're selling them a VHS. If you say, I'm selling you a tape player, well, what the hell does that do to me? Like, what's it for, right? What's the experience it's going to grant me? You're actually selling the movies that people love on demand. That's what was being sold. So how did VHS win that war? Well, it did a couple of things. First of all, it had more titles on VHS, including, as some people who are, I bet you if somebody's watching the replay of this live stream, somebody's going to say all the porno chose VHS and that's why it won. I think that may be like a chicken and egg kind of thing, because one of the things about VHS is that more titles ended up on VHS. VHSs were, I think, at a certain point, a little easier to manufacture, and the players were cheaper to buy. The early players were not as high quality as beta. They got better. I think the quality of VHS and beta was much more in parity by like 1989, 1990 versus 1984. But certainly early on, the beta was better, but it was also more expensive. The tapes were more expensive. The player was more expensive. So if you're choosing one, you're probably going to want to choose the cheaper one. Even though it's not as high a quality, it grants you the same thing, which is access to movies at home. And for a lot of people in the 80s, they weren't watching their movies at home on a big screen TV. My dad bought us a big screen TV, I think in 1991. And it was a big deal. People did not have, it was a rear projection big screen TV, which is a big thing at the time. It was a big deal, but he loved watching movies with us, and we loved watching movies as kids, and we liked playing Nintendo, so he bought us a big TV for Christmas one year. This 45-inch big screen TV, and now people are like, 45 inches is like a $150 TV at Walmart or $150 TV at Costco or something. And back then it was hard to get those big things. So this was a big gift, and this was like a very like gratuitous thing to own back in 1991. But anyway, those VHSs, early on, people were watching them on like 13-inch, 20-inch TVs. They weren't watching them on big screen TVs. So to them, it's like, it's maybe not as high quality, but you're not even going to really notice for most consumers. So it doesn't matter. Like, the increased quality of beta just is not that relevant when someone's just saying, I just want to watch movies at home. Then as the format wars go on, the inevitable winner is going to basically be whoever has the most movies available, rather than whoever has the best quality format or something like that. You're not selling the format. Oh, Betamax has great audiovisual quality. Great. Well, what can I watch on it? Well, there's no movies on it, but all the movies are well, I'm going to pick VHS because it has the things I want to watch. So because VHS had more things that people wanted to watch, probably including the porno videos, VHS won. VHS won because it offered more of what people wanted, which was access to the movies they wanted to watch on demand. As the amount of videos available on VHS began to dwarf the amount of videos available on Betamax, it was inevitable. VHS was going to win the format war because what are people buying? They're buying access to movies. It's the same thing with game consoles. And so I'll transition a little bit into game consoles because I'm going to play some games in a minute here. By the way, you can get the hardback of Needle Ash right now for like $20 or something. Whoops. Anyway, so one of the things that started happening in the aughts when I talk about like Gaming Ground Zero in 2007 was there was a big push for HD gaming, for really this high quality visual experience with good graphics, like cinematic quality, like photorealistic stuff. And that's been going on for a while now. So the thing about what you're selling with a game console, this is the big difference between Nintendo and like the HD twins, like Xbox and PlayStation. Xbox and PlayStation tend to focus their sales on the specifics of hardware and things like that. At least they have in past generations. But it is the selling of the real thing, which is access not just to games, because what is a game? It's access to fun, things which you enjoy doing. So when you look at the Nintendo Switch, and maybe you're going to buy a Nintendo Switch for $200, you're looking at it, okay, for this $200 object, I'm buying access to all of these games. So the games that I want to play, the games which are fun, which platform are they on? Well, they're on the Nintendo platform for a lot of people. That's why Nintendo's super popular. It's why the Nintendo Switch has done so well. It's why it's why, for instance, the Wii did so much more sales than the PlayStation 3. And this upset a lot of like gaming journos and a lot of people that created this hardcore gamer thing, which was laughable at the time because they're like, oh, Call of Duty is like a hardcore game. They called it a core game. I'm like, it's a casual shooter. It's a shooter for casuals. We didn't think Call of Duty was ever a serious 3D shooter, but we played 3D shooters back in the 90s, like Doom, Quake, and all that kind of stuff. Serious 3D shooters were like Quake 3 or Unreal Tournament 2004, like really high level playing that was going on, very Twitch-centered games. If you watch Quake speedruns, you'll see what I mean. Like, there's no contest as far as the skill required to master, even Quake versus a Call of Duty 4 or something like that. So anyway, it was just funny how core gamers became this thing because they played better graphics and more serious games about war and stuff, rather than Mario jumping around planets or somebody in a fantasy land. Why was Mario outselling all these other serious games? Because it's more fun. That's why. So when you're buying a console, you're buying access to games, and not just buying access to games like books. You're buying access to the experience the games give you, which is fun. You're buying access to a certain unique and fun thing that you want to experience, not just having games. So what the games are selling, what you're selling when you sell a game, really matters. One of the reasons that I think Sony really did well with the PlayStation 2 is that they sold access to a lot of games with the PlayStation 2. The PlayStation 2 was backward compatible with the PlayStation 1. This was huge at the time, but the backwards compatibility started to kind of, I don't know, it was ignored for a little while, 7 or 8 years ago, but it was really huge when the PlayStation 2 came out, because what are you selling with the PlayStation 2? You were selling access to future games on the Sony platform, and you had confidence that there were going to be a lot of future games because there were a lot of games on the previous console, the PlayStation 1. You're selling access to a huge catalog of games in the PS1. So if you didn't buy the PS1, you bought the PS2, even if there weren't that many games out at launch, there was a huge back catalog of PS1 games that you could play. So you're buying access to games. And you're buying based on a promise that that hardware is going to be able to play games for a certain number of years. And so you're going to be able to have access to games. Plus, it was a DVD player back when a lot of people didn't have DVD players yet. So if you bought that PlayStation 2, you got a DVD player. You got someone just mentioned it in chat. You got a DVD player. You got access to PS1 games, a CD player. You got all of these things with the PS2. You bought access to things that you actually wanted. It wasn't because it was a sleek black box, and it wasn't because it had a Sony logo. It's because of what you got. Compared to the GameCube. Now, the GameCube was a great platform. The GameCube didn't have backwards compatibility with Nintendo 64, obviously. It had a good gaming reputation to it, but it kind of had to roll for a little while before people were buying a lot of GameCubes because it didn't have that huge back catalog. This was a thing with the PS3 that they really emphasized, but the PS3 was so expensive. You look at it and it's like, if you're going to buy into the PS3 at like $700 or whatever, it was like, yeah, you're buying a huge back catalog of games, but you could just buy a PS2 and get that same back catalog of games. And the PS2 you could buy at the used game store for like $100. So you just buy that. Gave you access to Blu-ray. Lots of people didn't have HD TVs. The PS3 was really ahead of its time, but that backwards compatibility was huge. There's a reason Microsoft has, in essence, had backwards compatibility with all of their consoles, although people don't emphasize that. The Xbox 360 could play OG Xbox games, and this new one can play the entire catalog of all Xbox games ever. That's really good. So if you're going to buy an Xbox Series X, you're like, if you've never owned a Microsoft console before, you have a bunch of games you can already go out and play and collect and buy and enjoy right from day one, regardless of how good or bad the launch lineup is for the Xbox Series X. That's a big thing. So anyway, that's my little lecture for today. If you're selling a product, what are you selling? You're not selling a book. You're selling the story that's in the book, and you're selling the experience that the reader's going to have with that. Same thing with a comic book, a game, anything that you're selling. You're selling that unique experience for people, not selling an object. The object doesn't hold any kind of special weight. Anyway, let's go.